Welcome to this webinar, Copilot or Autopilot, how AI will change sales cycles as we know them. I'm Anthony James. I've worked at the intersection of technology and creativity for the past 20 years. You might already follow me on LinkedIn for my perspective on innovation and fast-growing companies. I'm honored to be hosting this fireside chat for Revenue Grid. Today, we're going to be diving into the fast-moving but challenging world of artificial intelligence. And we'll be looking specifically at the role of AI as a co-pilot, or whether we go down the full automation path, choosing the autopilot option. A little bit of admin before we begin. We're streaming via LinkedIn Live, and for those joining us online, you can send us questions directly in the chat. We will have questions at the end of the discussion, and we'll do our very best to answer as many as we can. To guide us and to work through the co-pilot and autopilot discussion, I'm joined by some experts from across the world. Sindre Haaland is the CEO and founder of SalesScreen, joining us from Norway. Good evening. Jim Goldfinger is the Chief Customer Officer and partner at Customer Times, joining us from the US West Coast. Hi, Jim.
How are you, Anthony?
And Vlad Verensky, CEO and founder of Revenue Grid, joining us from Atlanta. So, gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to please introduce each of yourselves, tell us a little bit about yourselves, and most importantly, tell us which team you're on, whether you're on Team Autopilot or Team Copilot. So, over to you. Sindre, why don't you kick us off?
All right. It's a pleasure, Anthony. It's happy to be here. As you mentioned, I'm the CEO and founder of SalesScreen. So I've been in the game of sales now for well over a decade. But what is a bit special with my background is that I actually took a computer science major in artificial intelligence. And that was all the way back in 2010. So it's definitely been top of mind for me, but it hasn't been until recent development that it really became top of mind for the company to put it into our world-leading sales gamification platform. So I'm excited to be here, and I'm on the Team Copilot. So.
Team Copilot. So one for Team Copilot. Okay. Jim.
Hey, Anthony. Jim Goldfinger, Chief Customer Officer of Customer Times. I've actually been in the CRM space for now right at about 40 years. And what's exciting to me is I'd say in the first, 38 years, the technology evolved maybe 2 or 3 years worth. And the rest of our time was just moving platforms from green screen to client server to web to cloud. And I'm very excited about where we are now, because I think we finally have a point of revolution more than evolution, and I'm on Team Copilot for now.
Vlad, I really hope that maybe Autopilot's going to have somebody on their team, or this is going to be a very one-sided discussion. But please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely, of course, I will be an Autopilot team for sure. Thank you, Anthony. My name is Vlad Voskresensky. I'm a co-founder, and I have been a long time a CEO of a company called Revenue Grid. Why I'm in the team of Copilot, because that's pretty much the DNA of a company. When company was funded, it was Invisible CRM. Name was Invisible CRM. We rebranded. But the whole idea of the business and the problem we're trying to solve was that salespeople do not like CRM, and they have very good reasons for not liking a CRM, because for them it's just a reporting tool and it doesn't help them to sell. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to let salespeople focus on what they should do, take everything else out of their plate and fill out CRM automatically, do some changes in CRM automatically for them, so sales reps would not bother with this and would start to love CRM versus hate CRM. Long journey, more than 20 years in CRM industry. And I should admit that probably when we came up with that idea, it was a bit premature and maybe ahead of the time. But clearly what's going on in technology space these years, I would say, to me, signaling that autopilots are possible, and it's not even far future. If not today, it's tomorrow. So definitely team of Autopilot.
Great. Thank you so much. So Again, for those listening, please send us your questions directly into the chat as we get into it. Vlad, why don't we keep going with you just for a moment, and maybe you can give us your definition of what do you mean by Autopilot. You're the only one on Team Autopilot.
Sure.
Why don't we start there and just look at, what do we mean by these two spaces?
Yeah, let's play with the definitions first. Let's decide on the definitions, right? So last couple of years, we're all seeing the raving of AI in all of the industries, right? Sales is not an exception. And there are so many tools which are popping up driven by AI and not only by AI. And many of them are being called Copilot, okay? Why it's Copilot? Because it's often a recommendation signaling to sales rep or sales leader, to someone who's in the sales role, okay? Recommendation, providing the reports, insights, suggestions what to do, maybe prepping a little bit of a work. More like in my assistant telling me where do I need to put my attention or what should I be dealing with to be successful. This is clearly co-piloting. It's an advisor to me who tells me what to do. To me, an autopilot would be if I would agree with the suggestions and say, like, then go do it. And go do it for me. Just don't ask me. Just put it. Whatever. Should it be an update to CRM field? Should it be an email to prospect? Should it be, I don't know, research of my lead and filling out the rest of ICP data in my CRM, things like that. So to me, autopilot is when we do not touch the steering wheel when we drive our Teslas, and from time to time it may ask us to touch the wheel so it knows that we're still not sleeping, but that's pretty much autopiloting experience.
Great. I love that analogy with the with driving our Teslas on full autopilot. It sort of puts it into great context. So, Sindre, Jim, who'd like to kick us off on the Copilot?
I guess get going here, because it's not only about Copilot versus Autopilot. It's also something about context and of time. So like where we are right now, there's definitely opportunities for perhaps Autopilot to be beneficial. But I think long term, it's definitely about supporting the human being. And I have multiple examples of that. But like once something becomes an autopilot from an AI perspective, human beings are so good at figuring out that this content really sounds like ChatGPT. Like, is this real? Is this you? Is this authentic? And they start to question everything. And it's the same with for instance, if you do outreach, automated, like that becomes noise so incredibly fast. So hence, I think the creativity and the human nature is going to shine through, and the real value over time is going to be in Copilots.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think time is a lot of it, right? People are worried about these tools and whether you can trust the output, whether it's hallucinating. And I think it is going to take time before there's full trust. But I do think there's great, close enough kind of, directionally correct content that you can leverage to make us all a bit smarter, but then make it our own, right? So I do believe we might get to automating some very specific tasks, but I'm more about, can you help me do my job a little bit faster? Can you, take in, ingest a file of 85 pages and tell me what's most important, and then let me decide what to do with those insights.
So Vlad, how do you respond to your co-pilot colleagues here from an autopilot perspective?
Yeah, so I completely agree that it's all a matter of trust, okay? And do we trust the technology to do something for us or not? I may agree that we are far from completely trusting Autopilot to be our digital twin, okay? Because obviously the ultimate goal would be to create something which we can call a digital twin of a sales rep or line manager or sales leader who will do exactly what human being does. That's far in the future, and I'm not even sure it's possible. But at the same time, there are a lot of those duties, tasks, jobs, where we can start trusting autopilots to completely do the work. Going back to my Tesla example, there are people who yet do not trust Tesla to drive them and their families on a highway, but they're okay summoning a car or parking car completely automatically, just because the level of danger is different, right? So that's fine. Similar here, there is a lot of work in sales process, which is routinely repeatable work, and it's unavoidable. So I think some of those duties can be easily substituted, not necessarily by ChatGPT or GPT-like technologies, but AI as well, and not necessarily AI, just a pure automation. I would say that parts of, or if not all, lead development representative duties could be completely automated, because there is no brainer once you give a system a name. Go and check what company that guy works for, check what's the phone number, if this are ICP, yada, 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 and fill out CRM, which is typically LDR job, okay? Could that be autopiloted? Yes. What if AI will hallucinate? So what? It's like one lead out of a million. I don't mind. I probably would not let Autopilot to negotiate final wording of my contracts with the multi-million deal. I get that. But there is a big difference between those corner examples, and autopiloting would eat part of our jobs, and we would put more and more and more trust to that, and just forget that we should do it manually. We don't wash our dishes manually. We have, wash the dishwashers. We don't, like, we have washing machines. We do this and this and this. We used to do it manually. Now we don't. We don't even know how to. That's okay.
That's a really good point, actually, Vlad. So hard to counter argue some of your metaphors, right? So I also want to just touch on one thing that you brought up, and I think it's important to highlight. Is AI ChatGPT? Is it the same as large language models? Like, it's not, right? It's AI automation. Like, we've been doing automation for years. What's changed now that suddenly grants people to do a tiny bit of automation and call that AI? I'm not sure, but I do agree that there's a level of let's say vision in having more and more being done in autopilot of the repetitive tasks that automation needs to happen, and perhaps AI can help make that happen. So, like, what do you actually define then as AI in those examples?
That's a very good point. And well, we all know that mathematically, going back to definitions, what we call AI right now is not an AI, right? It's machine learning one way or the other. But that's fine. It's all play of the words. What I would say is what has changed in the last 10 years, because AI was invented back in, 50s, 60s, right? The term
even before that.
Yeah, even before that. And no one would bother. The eye-opener was that when computers were developed to the level that they could process so much data, that it was affordable to use ML techniques and get some sense out of it. What has happened just recently with the LLM models and ChatGPT-like technologies is that type of AI started to seem smarter for us. Before that, those conclusions were like childish. Now they're more smart. And by the way, to me, I also have that analogy, which I'm stealing from someone else. The other guy told me that, but I loved it. And the analogy is that AI-driven tools right now, like junior employees of your company, you really need to be very precise when you set the task. If you would ask your assistant, hey, prep me a deck for my Monday meeting with a client, with a senior level assistant, that's enough. That's enough of a task. But with the junior, you should say, like, hey, I'm meeting that company, and please make sure that you mention this on the slide. Don't forget to include this and this and this. So you have to be a really low level. And we are dealing with the technology, which is AI, being called AI, which is right now a junior type of a level of employee of our employee, right? But it's already an employee, not like it used to be. I think it's going to grow to the mid-level, sometimes to senior level, and maybe even it would be a master better than us in some of the aspects.
Yeah. That's really well put again. Like, I don't disagree with you. And I think that automation and what's changed, at least from my perspective, is the capability to quite easily traverse very large amounts of data that is unstructured. And that's just phenomenal. So it's definitely something that enables a lot more automation for many companies and for many use cases. That's super thrilling. But I think in the end, it's automation. So I'm unsure if the real artificial intelligence is thus an autopilot or a co-pilot. In my mind, it's still a co-pilot, but it could be definitionally speaking.
Sindre, it sounds like you might be wavering in your co-pilot autopilot team. Jim, I'd like to bring you in here.
Sure.
to give a little bit of a perspective, I mean, we see so much about AI and ChatGPT and all these large language models today, but with the Copilot, Autopilot, is this more of an evolution rather than a revolution, moving to fully automating all our tasks and turning it over to AI?
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Anthony. I think there's a revolution now in having these tools accessible and what they can do compared to the way we handled these tasks before. But I do believe we're absolutely going to see an evolution within the category, right? So our team we've been building out applications, leveraging these large language models, and every day we're tracking, what if I ask this question to each of these 7 different models? Who gives me a better answer? Which ones can process a file better? Which ones can read a chart within a file? And what we're seeing is they're leapfrogging each other every day. And the level of trust is changing, getting better. Sometimes there's a 1 step back for 4 steps forward. So I do think that's the way I see it. And I know that, a lot of people have heard the phrase, you may not be replaced by AI, but you will well be replaced by someone who understands it better than you, right? So I think it's incumbent upon all of us to figure out what's out there and how do we use it, and what are the trust considerations, right? When are we at risk of writing back to a model? When are we at risk of getting, hallucinations? But, we can crawl, walk, run on this a little bit in terms of, being able to take, to Sindre's point, 50 files, load them down and get key takeaways, or compare, insights between the files. We're in the services business. I could load several statements of work and say, what was the highest rate we ever charged for that role? Are there any discrepancies between our billing periods because we just merged with another company, but we sell to the same companies? They're going to figure this out eventually. Let's look at it right away. I think it also will make obsolete a number of software categories, number of automation categories. It's OCR, it's so many different things. These tools have gotten so powerful. We have to rethink what tools do we have in our landscape where we can start to replace and again, dip our toe and work our way into the deeper ocean.
Vlad, anything you'd like to add to that evolution or revolution impact?
I'm sure it's going to be evolutional starting from now, when we already kind of had a revolution around AI. We have slightly different concept than Jim was just explaining. What we are looking at, it's not the tools we can change or substitute with AI, but it's more like a duties or functions within the sales org. And here I maybe even want to turn it to more practical use case. So how exactly we use copilots versus autopilots, or one of those in the business processes. So what we've decided internally, the best way to identify those areas where autopiloting can help us would be to look at the whole sales cycle we have and think about this through the lens of what we can outsource to the other company. Many companies are right now outsourcing SDR, BDR motions, okay? Some companies outsource RevOps, but some of the other duties will be never outsourced, like, the real account exec who's closing the deal. Now, those functions which company feel comfortable to outsource, it means that they do have a higher level of trust that it's okay to outsource. Even if something goes wrong, it's still okay, and we can explain everything to a partner, a vendor, who will be able to pick up and do it. Most of all, it's a great candidate for autopiloting. If you can outsource your BDR motion to a third-party company, would you be trusting an AI which would do the same for you, and you would not even know if it's a live person or machine that does it for you? Same about LDR function. If you have real people who are doing LDRing work, or you outsource it to someone, or you give it to machine. So I would look at those type of jobs which are existing in sales org, and try one by one to outsource those which are not the core, and where you feel confident that if something will go off the rail, it's not a tragedy.
Yeah, I don't fully agree on that. Like, let's take the SDR role as an example. I think this is a revolution, and the roles are changing like very fast, very drastically. But I think it was Sam Blunt, the former CRO of Brex, and also a big voice in the SaaStr community, who pointed out that, in their history of doing SDR campaigns, the ones that was most impactful was the ones that was the most creative. So it was when they started to, buy billboards over a certain small area prior to reaching out and doing so with reference to that, or it was identifying that a company was recently raised around. So they sent them a bottle of champagne to the office with a handwritten note telling them to celebrate that in style. And that got, heads to turn and attention. So they didn't have to do many of that. The conversion rate was insane, but it was the creativity that made them kind of stand out and get attention. So I think that, like, the old way of doing it with running email-based sequences, sure, you could automate that, right, with some AI. And to your point with the Turing test here, like, if you don't know if it's an AI or a human being doing it, doesn't matter. Probably not. But will it be impactful? Probably not. So it's a tough one.
Fair enough. I agree about the creativity part of it. But let me bring another analogy I'm using. So to me, the autopilot right now, it's more like an apprentices for those artists in the Middle Ages, right? Those famous artists, they were able to produce a lot of artwork, whatever the art was, not because they were so productive, but because they have a ton of apprentices who were helping them to put the major parts of picture or sculpture or whatever, and then they would do a genius touch. Still, though, we call work of that guy. We do not say work of that guy, comma, and many apprentices who were helping, right? And those apprentices were getting better and better. They become journeymans, and then some of them became masters. I think this will happen with AI as well. Right now, I do believe that a ton of apprentices are already around, and they're AI driven. We just need to start trusting them. But I completely agree with you, not in the creativity aspect, because we all know that AI cannot be creative. It could reiterate, it could really generate something from what has happened, but it would never be able, at least yet, to invent something new.
Great discussion. Let's focus down very specifically now on that. We've talked a lot about creativity. We've talked some great examples there, but what's that impact on the sales cycle specifically? What are you seeing out there? Where is this going? What is that journey that we're on?
Jim, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I mean, what I'm seeing, one of the things that excited me about this, Anthony, is that, in the near 40 years I've been doing this, mostly sales systems are not making salespeople smarter. They're not giving them the right talking points. And I think now more than ever, with those of us who work in very complex, businesses with complex solutions, it often takes 6 months to 18 months to ramp up and really get your head around what products and services you provide and why they should fit and why the customer should care. And I think now these tools, at least for that, and I mentioned directionally correct, earlier, that we've been building out platforms. Again, I call it putting a saddle on a wild horse, where I can get some good talking points and I can, store that, reuse it, so forth. So I can get smarter faster. And I think that's important. And again, ultimately, maybe I want the customer to get all the answers themselves. But I do think that we're in this period where let me pick and choose what I'm seeing, but give me the talking points. Let me load in, a 250-page annual report and get the right insights, and then ask these tools to give me the right talking points based on what my solution can do. So, that really hasn't been available. There've been some tools in that general area, but they couldn't keep them up. They never really got the right traction. Most of those have come and gone. And I think here you have the ability to not have to have a marketing department continue to update the content, that you can keep this fresh by, mashing up the strategies against the opportunities. So anyway, I think it's exciting. I think especially for complex salespeople that are selling a product that is new to them in certain ways, right? They're either new to selling in that industry, selling that solution, that's the functional area, maybe new to sales. These tools can now help accelerate my path to competency, if you will.
Fascinating. Sindre, have you got some perspectives on that?
Absolutely. I think that a lot has happened over the past year or two. And some of it is due to the macro, some of it is due to AI, but there's some really forward-leaning companies that is adopting this very early and doing that really well. And what I'm seeing at those companies is, for instance, that the traditional tactics like account-based everything or account-based marketing, if you may, has dramatically changed. And by that, I mean, you can really monitor your whole TAM in a database. You can enrich it ongoingly using AI to really cross-pollinate, like which ones have the highest intent score right now, which ones should you reach out to at the scale and with new, let's say, pieces of intelligence using LLM that you just didn't have prior. So like combining a lot of these new things like the LLMs and the machine learning algorithms and the processing power and the data warehouses all together to really enrich those strategies makes the sales cycles faster in a way. On the flip side, you have like the building of pipeline, which is slower because people now are being bombarded in the millions, and really everything just turned into noise. So you turn it off. So there's counter forces in play here.
And Vlad, your perspective. I mean, you live and breathe this every single day as well. That impact on sales. We've heard some great examples there. So maybe you can also give us some other great examples of that impact on the sales cycle.
Absolutely. Talking about the impact on the sales cycle. So obviously, let's talk about why we need that impact, right? We all want sales to be more productive, shorter, better, faster, like more productive. Now, if you think about all of those courses and books about how people become more productive, what it means productivity, one of the corner advice is do not multitask. Do one thing and then focus on the other thing. Now, if you are a sales guy, you're in a miserable position because there is no way you cannot multitask. That's it. So there is no way to increase productivity just following that traditional advice. You really need to go in non-traditional ways, leapfrog, shortcut that, right? So now talking about the AI and how it can change the sales process, it's obviously understanding what people are doing, then trying to behave like people are behaving. But most important is to understand what people are not doing, but they should be doing. And then either telling them through Copilot experience that you should be doing this, or even doing it for them through Autopilot experience. Once a very good sales rep told me why he does not like CRM. He said that every time I'm opening CRM, I'm feeling guilty towards the CRM because it has all of the tasks I didn't do. So that's the problem we can solve, automating that. We can really look at all of those routinely repeatable tasks which sales reps are doing, and they're always multi-threaded, and just autopilot some of those tasks and do it with the tools. If human being is so wants to control things, it's a Copilot experience. Those tools can suggest what to do. And by the way, we've prepped for you the text, we've prepped for you the change in CRM, we've prepped for you the draft of agreement, hit send button, OK button, etc. With time, people will trust more and more and more and more, and they will let some of the things go to autopilot, others would stay Copilot. And some of them, I believe, not more than 10-15% would be really only up to human being, because this is art of the sales. There is always a bit of a part of art.
Fascinating. Are there any other great, you guys seen that you're out there, you're in the industry, are there any other great examples you've seen, maybe adjunct to that sales cycle? Vlad, you use that great example of opening CRM and feeling guilty every time. Have you seen any other great examples where AI is being used in this, sales cycle adjunct to what salespeople are doing?
I have a great one, actually. I recently joined the board of a company called Skills AI, and they're using these LLM models to simulate calls. So it's basically an enablement tool, right? So you can actually have intelligent conversations with a robot voice, but because of the computing power now with the new NVIDIA gear, it really feels real time. So it's almost a bit scary. And with all of these models coming out, as Jim mentioned, they are leapfrogging each other. So they switch around, and it's profound how fast this goes. But you can really create courses based on scenarios and train them at scale. So it's a really excellent way and a new enabler for sales enablement, and in that sense, to really train larger groups of salespeople. So that's exciting.
Fascinating. Just as we come to questions, because we've got quite a few from the floor, just give us I mean, you that opens up a whole can of worms, right, Sindre? In this, how do we make sense of all of this? Where do each of you, just very quick snippet, where do you see it actually all going? Jim?
Well, I do think we're going to see more and more autopilot over time as we carve out and the models get better, our reliability on the data gets better. At the first round, we weren't getting any attribution. So you get an answer, you don't know if it's hallucinating. Now it's giving you attribution, even to the page of the document, right? So it's when we get to that point where we know we trust the answers, we might look for more and more to handle autopilot. So but I do think that, and prompt engineering, right? What's the best prompt and what's the best prompt for different models, right? And then right now, I think the cost is really low, right? Everybody's trying to get, a land grab, right? So over time, I think as companies start to embrace it, companies get value out of it. I think you'll start seeing the cost go up because the cost of storing on the, all these server farms, is going to catch up and they're all going to take a loss for a while. So yeah, I think those that get ahead of it now to see what it can and can do for you, start isolating where the real fit is for your business, test a few of the different LLMs out there. And then the last is to understand the difference between acting on data, structured versus unstructured. Data inside my four walls in applications like Salesforce, SAP, and others, and unstructured data, which is like external content, like annual reports, things like that. Merging those together and really getting true insights and what I'll call actionable insights.
Okay, Sindre, where do you potentially see this going?
I really do think this platform shift, like mobile, like cloud, like AI is the new platform shift, and there's so much innovation taking place right now. And on a, let's say, more grandiose scale, yeah, I agree. Like things will start as co-pilots, and you will see more of the tedious tasks being more automated through enabled by this AI technology. And ultimately, that's going to make us more productive. So you need fewer humans, but real skill and like difference between a good worker and a not so good worker isn't their discipline and productivity anymore. It's actually their creativity. So it's how can you stand apart and be creative in that prompt engineering or whatever it is, because you're so enabled to the fingertips that it really comes down to your intelligence, your creativity, and your way to think outside the box.
Great. And Vlad, your quick snapshot of where we're going, what the future looks like?
Yeah, I agree with Sindre that it all goes to experience and creativity, though I would slightly argue that creativity is the core here. It's only a small part of creativity. The big part of it is an experience. A good sales rep is good because he has been in so many situations that he knows how to behave here and there, and he reacts immediately on a new situation based on his experience, not necessarily on creativity. He's not inventing. So here I have a bold statement that I think that the best sales rep in your company is your CRM, whatever the CRM is, and whoever is your best sales rep you think. Why? Because your CRM has been through all of the sales cases you ever have been through the history of your company. All of the won opportunities, all of the lost opportunities, everything was through CRM. The problem though is that yet we do not ask our best sales rep, which is CRM, how do we deal in this new situation, new quote unquote, because most of all, it's a combination of what has happened in the past. So here AI and technology in general can help a lot because it can bring you that experience to you immediately. There is no creativity. It's just not make any mistakes, figure out that we've been in that situation. If we did this, it didn't help. If we have done that, it did help. So do this. That's it.
Yeah, good one. All right. Well, thank you. We've got quite a few questions from the floor. We've had a lot of people joining us throughout the conversation as well. So I'll throw the question open to whoever would like to jump in and ask it. First question we've got off the floor is, how do you address confirmation bias and users trusting the recommendation, especially in that co-pilot context? So I might throw that to Team Co-Pilot to start with.
Yeah, I'm happy to take a first stab. So as I was sharing before, the first is getting the attribution, right? So where is that response coming from? And again, for a while, they didn't have it. Now, most of the LLMs will provide you that. then the next question is it relevant, right? And that's why I think certainly in the area of sales, you still need the people, right? I need to interpret whether that's relevant. It might be true and accurate, and that's what the LLM thought would be a great answer for me, but I have to decide that, right? So I think knowing that I can trust the data, which I'm getting attribution, and the next is using my experience to Vlad's point is this helping me, right? And being able to pick and choose from the responses I'm getting as to what I can use that's relevant, and then getting smarter over time, right? These answers, and we've sort of, that's what we're looking at. We're building out tools to say keep these answers and recast the deck, maybe shuffle a few more, get me some other answers, and then I'll over time determine what the best answers, not just accurate but relevant.
Mm-hmm. Well said. I do agree with everything you just said. I just want to add, this is one of my fears as well. Like, you will get down in rabbit holes where you will have echo chambers, right? So how do you actually manage to get away from the confirmation bias and think outside of the box? I don't think they can. Hence, it's a co-pilot. You are in the driving seat, and you need to look at how it came up with the answer and assess if that is too narrow of a scope or makes sense or assists you in somehow. Or maybe you can challenge it with your perspective and get a different type of answer, adding that to the prompt. But it's a very intelligent and good question in my mind.
Vlad, have you got a quick perspective from a team Autopilot?
Yeah, I can respond to that question from the autopiloting standpoint, and I would say that you behave with Autopilot just like you behave with your employee. So if your employee does something wrong, and then you figure out that first you get pissed off on it, and then you go back and coach your employee, right? So it's the same. You go back and prompt engineer the models, the tools you use, that next time just don't do that, do better. And then with time, you develop that trust that, okay, now it does what I've told it to do.
Fair.
Great. Where is we've got another question from the floor, is where is the quality control? Where is the quality control in these systems and the information that the sales teams are getting back?
Yeah, who owns that, right? That's a
good question. Who owns that? So what's the quality in this? It's thanks God we are not in healthcare, right? Where the cost of mistake is super high, right? So what if we reach out to wrong lead, not our ICP? Deadly mistake? No. Bad quality? Yes. I mean, things like this, right? So it really depends what level of quality we're expecting and what we're talking about. Again, to me personally, it's a combination of a trust and a prompt engineering, which is coaching, as we say, right?
Yeah, and I would say for me, what we're seeing is I think so many companies are experimenting, right? And so experimenting is asking the right prompts of the right models and then evaluating the responses. And I think in terms of quality control, I think a lot of companies who are doing this are thinking about, or if they're not, they should, have like a SWAT team, a governance structure, but also look for, figure out who does the best prompts, like you need to spend a little time to tweak that and then understand what are the best answers. And so the best way for me, from my perspective, is have, and they may be the same person or they may be different people who know how to, ask the best question and then evaluate the responses for relevancy. But I think you should start with a small team that gets that down before you open it up and have it be willy-nilly, because if you let everyone use these tools, ask the questions any way they want, hit whatever models they want, you are going to be at risk of getting bad quality and misrepresenting.
If you're fortunate enough to have an enablement team, I think it should sit with them to begin with.
We've got another great question, and Sindre, you actually started down this path with the AI discussions and having those conversations. But can you fake authenticity?
Yes, you can, unfortunately. So it's just going to be harder and harder to distinguish what is real and what is AI. Like the deepfakes now are scary good. So they just be prepared.
Yeah, it's certainly coming our way, isn't it? And it sort of leads to the next question around plagiarism and how you address that.
From my perspective, again, the testing that we're doing, the platforms we're building out, as I mentioned before, early on, you weren't getting attribution. Now you can. And we're now, we recognize we had a customer that said, yeah, but if you had an output, can you put footnotes so we know where it came from? You now can ask these tools, and we're trying it differently with different tools. And yeah, you could do that. So when you get an answer, it'll create footnotes and tell you where it found it at the bottom. So for me, that's really helpful to know that it wasn't all faked. It wasn't pulled out of thin air. You can actually go to the source that was summarized. But there may be that might be the litmus test, right? That if you're working that, and you're starting to see that, right? This was created by by AI, or it wasn't. But I think over time, we might see that I'm sending you some content and I'm attributing it, so whether we used AI tools or not, we know where the source is.
Yeah, and just to add on that, like the enterprises clearly is having a field day, right? Because they have more data than anyone else. So the incumbents, the enterprises, they get the most value out of this, but they can also much sooner buy enterprise subscriptions where they can, to an extent, avoid plagiarism by using it inside their own organization. So they have so much data, they have so much content that they don't go out off of something that is outside of the enterprise necessarily. It's coming from within.
Yeah, and I had any final thoughts on the whole authenticity and plagiarism?
I would respond with my own question. So what about the plagiarism? Like, let's talk about marketing. As soon as you say something cool, next day, everybody are using the same, right? It's so hard to stay unique, and everybody are repeating the best tricks, the best messages, the best content, I don't know, whatever, features, functions. So I think that's fine, to the sense that what works for people and with people is being spread. Definition game isn't here. So what's bad, what's good in this?
Yeah, fascinating discussion, and great to end with that open-ended question. Maybe what we'd like to do now is, just with everybody we've got online, is let us know where you've landed in this discussion. Are you Copilot or are you team Autopilot in listening to these fascinating discussions? There's a little poll link there on the screen. Please feel free to join us. Give us your thoughts. Continue to drop questions or thoughts into the chat as well. I'd like to just wrap by thanking you guys for your fascinating discussion. Thanks everybody for joining us. Be sure to follow Revenue Grid on LinkedIn, and you'll be notified about our next event. Gents, I'll leave you to say your thanks and wrap up.
Thank you, Anthony. Thanks everyone who was listening to us, and Sindre, Jim. I enjoyed our conversation and a bit of a battle here. So yeah. Super cool.
Yeah.
Well done.
Just, catch the wave and be prepared.
And I think there'll be a lot more coming, and I think maybe one of the next topics that we talk about is the ethics in sales when it comes to AI.